So Hippocrates said that all disease begins in the gut. And so I have no actual or potential conflict of interest in relation to this program or presentation. So if Hippocrates said that all disease begins in the gut, I want to know, is your microbiome the missing link to your health? Do you know what the microbiome is? The microbiome, the resident microbes in our body, collectively are called the microbiome. And in 2008, the National Institute of Health launched the Human Microbiome Project with the goal of identifying and sequencing the genomes of the microbiota that are found in the human body. And with this information, the scientists hope to develop a greater understanding of how changes in the human microbiome affect human health and also disease. There are 1,000 known bacteria in the microbiome with more than 3 million genes. I could talk about that for a long, long time. The microbiome actually is consisting of all the microorganisms that reside in the skin, the saliva, and the oral mucosa, the conjunctiva, and the gastrointestinal tract. That all comprises of the microbiome. We live, eat, breathe to support the health of the microbiome in our bodies, which in turn supports our mood, our mind, and our body. We've heard a lot this weekend about what to eat, exercises to do, yoga. All of this plays a part in our microbiome. And we know that inflammation is the root of all disease. So what causes this inflammatory reaction? And where does the inflammation come from? The gut and the imbalance of the microbiome is the starting place of this inflammation. It is the gatekeeper for the inflammatory response. And food can set off this inflammatory response. It can harm or benefit the microbiome of the gut. I am a lipedema patient. I'm stage 1. I never progressed further. And in my late teens, I started identifying which foods made me swell. I established an anti-inflammatory diet before I was even diagnosed. I was diagnosed when I was in Austria with my teacher, Hildegard. And when I look back, I see what I did, and a lot of what I did, not knowing what I was actually doing at the time, was actually working with my gut and with that microbiome. So the microbiome is very, very important to health. It helps with the production of vitamins and also helps with detoxification and influences our immune system. 70% of our immune system is actually in the gut. Neurotransmitters originate here. Dopamine and serotonin levels in the gut. So when you are not taking care of your gut properly, you do not have enough dopamine or serotonin, and you can feel depressed and you can feel lethargic. So you'll see why this is so important for lipedema and for Derkham's patients. We have a gut-associated lymph tissue, or the GALT, which is actually part of the immune system in the lymphatic system of the gut, and it protects the body from invasion and regulates inflammation. The microbiota is interesting because it is unique specifically to you. It is your personal fingerprint. It changes depending on your habits, on how you were born, whether you were born through the birth canal, your lifestyle, and 1/3 of the microbiome, 2/3 of the microbiome is actually specific to you. And the microbiome changes depending on what food you're eating and what you're doing at any given time. In the gut, we have a lot of bacteria. We have 100 trillion bacteria living inside of us. I was listening to a seminar recently, and at the end of the seminar, they were talking about bacteria. They said, so play in the mud and have your dog lick you, because we need the bacteria. The gut bacteria improve digestion, they boost immunity, and they may even help us to get leaner. There have been some studies showing that. And the gut microbes help to break down the proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. We do not have enough enzymes to effectively break these down. And so for gut ecology, we want to have a healthy gut bacteria, which we're going to talk about how we can sustain that and what can actually make it worse. It's like soil in the garden. How many of you are gardeners? You love my garden. So you nourish the soil and you feed it what it's needed, your houseplants as well. Well, we need to nourish our gut. This is the soil in the garden. The bacteria in the microbiome are vital to our health, and they are so connected to brain function. And you know, we sometimes say, I had a gut feeling, or I could just feel it in my gut. Well, you can. The vagus nerve is in the gut and then connects with the brain. Isn't this amazing how important our gut is? And we tell you what to eat, but now I'm telling you why and what that's doing. Because inflammation begins in the gut, and there can be increased gut permeability. Certain foods that you eat can cause leaky gut syndrome and increased gut permeability, which then causes all kinds of other problems. And the gut microbiota changes promote obesity, increase inflammation, and impair estrogen regulation. The bioterrain is the environment of your body. Everything that you have done, actually all your thoughts as well, coming from the brain, what you're eating, how you're exercising, who you surround yourself will affect this bioterrain. And we want to keep the terrain really, really strong in order to have optimal health. And the way you live and eat will affect that. You want to eat nutrient-dense foods and have good digestive capabilities if you eat the foods that are correct, and stress management, because stress can actually change the microbiome as well. I work with a lot of my patients with aromatherapy to help with stress management. And here, just a little cartoon of the bacteria and how the gut is loaded with bacteria. And it's showing you the good bacteria splitting the food, and some vitamins need good bacteria to actually be absorbed. There are also bad bacteria in the gut. And when you eat too much sugar or too many carbohydrates, they turn to sugar, and you can cause problems with bad bacteria, and then you can get a Candida overgrowth, Candida albicans overgrowth. You've heard of that. So what do we do? How do we improve this microbiome? Because that's what you guys want to know. Eat real food, whole food, pure food, food that is not processed, not packaged. It's best to eat at home. Even if you are on a limited budget, there are many, many things that you can do to still be healthy. And I encourage you all to eat at home. I teach all my patients healthy recipes, how to eat, how to cook, and I get people who've been eating out all the time suddenly eating at home, and they actually save money that way as well. Avoid sugar, because sugar causes terrible problems with the microbiome. It's also acid forming and pro-inflammation. Fermented foods, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit later, help with the gut flora. Avoid genetically modified foods. They are laced with organophosphates, and those destroy the gut microbiome, as do aspartame and all the sweeteners, artificial sweeteners. So we want to nourish your ecology, not necessarily deplete the ecology, by eating whole, live foods. And so if you have a healthy microbiome, you can support your mood and your mind and your body. And this is a really good support for lipedema and Derkham's patients, for fatigue, for brain fog, for memory difficulties, for depression and anxiety. You try eating a really healthy diet, your mood changes. And healthy microbes provide our GI tracts much needed support for digestion of food, assimilation, and also nutrient absorption from those healthy microbes. Fat disorder patients typically can have some of these disorders, including constipation, dyspepsia, which is the acid coming up, flatulence, bloating, and GERD, which is also the acid, gastroesophageal reflux disease. And there can be irritable bowel, bloating, and abdominal pain, and even leaky gut. So by healing the junctions of the intestines and sealing those junctions and eating a healthy diet, we can eliminate those. If you eat an anti-inflammatory diet and more alkaline, you don't have to have GERD. We know that there's increased inflammation with lipedema and Derkham's, And these unhealthy gut microbiota promote obesity and fatty liver disease. There's a connection with that. And actually, the fatty liver disease comes when you eat too much sugar. So sugar is pro-inflammatory. It's bad for the bacteria. It's bad for fatty liver. Not a good thing. Greatly increasing lymph production from the liver. Improved nutrition, improved gut microbiota, normalize lymph production. When you eat a meal that is high in fat of the long-chain fatty acids like meat, you can increase lymph flow tremendously, and that's too much when we have an overload anyway in our systems. So what increases these unhealthy bacteria? Processed foods and flours, gluten, because gluten now has gliadin. The wheat is not the same wheat that our grandparents ate. It's full of gliadin. It's also been treated with GMO. It's been a GMO food, which has the organophosphates and the herbicides, which cause insulin resistance and also inflammation. I already mentioned about aspartame and all the artificial sweeteners being really bad for the gut bacteria. They actually can promote diabetes. There's a whole cascade that's set up with the pancreas. Antibiotics, and Karen covered some of these yesterday. There are certain drugs that can actually affect the microbiome. So NSAIDs, acid blockers, and causing yeast overgrowth. If you do need to be on antibiotics, you need to have a very, very good probiotic to help offset that so you don't have a yeast overgrowth. Nutrient deficiencies can cause unhealthy gut bacteria. Inflammation and stress and pasteurized foods. Sugar promotes the growth of pathogenic yeast and other fungi. So what do? Probiotics. They are the live, good bacteria that primarily line your gut and help with nutrient absorption and support your immune system. I really like Lactobacillus plantarum and Acidophilus and Bifidobacterium longum and Lactobacillus brevis. So when you're getting a probiotic supplement, look for those. I'm going to show you foods that you can have if you don't want to buy the probiotic tablets. You can take foods. And what are prebiotics? Prebiotics fertilize the good bacteria that you already have in your gut, and they're just as important. And inulin is a prebiotic, but I'm going to tell you foods that are prebiotics that all of my patients say they love. So prebiotics are a type of a fiber, and they are undigestible plant fibers that already live inside of the large intestine. And the more food or prebiotics that the probiotics have to eat, the more efficiently these live bacteria work, and the healthier your gut will be. So Jerusalem artichokes and sunchokes. Who likes artichokes? Jicama is also a prebiotic fiber. Asparagus, we had some yesterday. And I want to thank the organizers. The food here, I've never been to a conference where I know I'm going to have really healthy food. It doesn't happen. So thank you very, very much. Amazing. Dandelion greens, which are very bitter, but they're also very good for the liver. I put them in my juice. Garlic and leeks. You should have about 5 grams of prebiotics every day. And when you have fiber-rich foods to fight the inflammation, the gut bacteria feed on the fiber, and they form something called butyrate. And butyrate is a fatty acid. Once the gut bacteria feast on the fiber, they produce the fatty acid called butyrate. But you need the good bacteria to be able to do that, and then you need the fiber in your diet too. So the intestinal cells rely on these healthy gut bacteria to produce butyrate. And butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid that helps against inflammation. It controls inflammation. It is found actually in butter. Believe it or not, it keeps the gut wall healthy and suppresses leaky gut. Once you heal and seal your gut lining, and once you have made your digestive system healthy and working properly again, you will be surprised how many symptoms in your body originated from your digestive system. So I'm challenging all of you to keep a food diary and take a look at the end of the week. And if you need help from a nutritionist, or I'm happy to help if you want to email me, analyze what you've done in a week. You might think you know what to eat, and you might think you're eating the right things, but sometimes it's in your brain and you're not doing it. So I challenge all of you to do that. And this is leaky gut. And leaky gut affects 80 to 90% of people, and it is the root cause of many diseases. And we have this inflammation, these undigested food particles, which actually pass through the blood vessels and into the body. Most dietary fats are long-chain fatty acids. Meat is a long-chain fatty acids, and they are absorbed by the lymphatics in the intestine. So we have these lacteals, which have villi. The villi have lacteals in the small intestine, and those are actually lymphatic vessels. And the long-chain fatty acids go through those. In patients with Dürkheim's and lipedema, we are already overloaded, and there may be some swelling in those lacteals, and so there's such an overload on the lymphatic system, we really would prefer to bypass those lymphatics. The long-chain fatty acids, after digestion, are actually stored in the adipose tissue. So the best to do are medium-chain fatty acids. And unlike long-chain triglycerides, they bypass the lymphatic system and enter the portal vein of the liver. They go directly to the liver, bypassing the intestines, so it has less of a strain on your lymphatic system. My teacher Hildegard told us about this in 1992 when I was in Austria. It took me a long time to really work out what this was all about, and then I discovered coconut oil. So coconut oil will do that. It'll lessen the lymph load. And the MCTs, we call them that, increase energy expenditure and fat oxidation, resulting in body adipose tissue loss. And so the type of food you eat will affect the function of the gut and also the volume of chyle. So chyle is a milky fluid that is produced by the gut during digestion of long-chain fatty acids. And when there is excess chyle, or the body is unable to absorb the chyle, we get something called Kylus reflux, which is not nice to have. And the lymph can leak through the intestinal, or through the walls of the skin, actually, and a white milky fluid. That would be when the lymphatic system is not absorbing fats or transporting the chyle correctly. Excessive fat, and that's really the long chain fat, can double the volume of chyle produced and add an extra 2 liters of fluid to the lymphatic system every day. The good fats are fish, nuts, seeds. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the long chain fatty acids. Excess chyle can also contribute to cardiovascular disease, obesity, chronic inflammation, and metabolic syndrome, all of which many of which we suffer from. So avoiding harmful fats and limiting animal fats will reduce the load on the lymphatic system. So we can have soluble fiber, which will increase the levels of butyrate. And remember, the butyrate is a medium-chain fatty acid, which reduces inflammation. So buckwheat and millet, and I don't know what happened. I did have quinoa in that slide, but it somehow got out of there. Amaranth and millet, these are the seed grains. And the seed grains are easy to digest, are good soluble fiber, and they help with the levels of butyrate. Insoluble fiber is also good. Those are your green leafy vegetables. So how do we increase the levels of butyrate? We eat foods that feed the bacteria, eat grain-like seeds, buckwheat, quinoa, millet, and amaranth, and then eat foods rich in beneficial bacteria, such as kefir and kimchi. I was off of dairy for 20 years. Now I've started eating a kefir because of the probiotics. I've chosen to do goat kefir, so I didn't want to go back to the dairy. And kimchi, and there are also cultured vegetables and sauerkraut, because the beneficial microbiota will actually release anti-inflammatory messengers and dampen the inflammatory response. So having coconut, I do all my cooking with coconut oil, and then I use olive oil in my salads. Sprouted seeds, and I think Karen spoke about this yesterday, chia seeds, flax seeds, and hemp seeds. I make a smoothie every morning, and I put chia, flax, and hemp, which I grind up every day, into the smoothie. Omega-3 fats, grass-fed beef if you need to eat beef, and wild-caught fish like salmon will support the microbiome. And here is goat kefir, and then cultured vegetables, sauerkraut, and kimchi. Kimchi's got really funny smell, so when I have it, my husband doesn't want to be in the room. Some people don't like that. But you can have sauerkraut, and the sauerkraut really needs to be naturally fermented sauerkraut, not the kind that's been cooked with vinegar and salt. It's got to be naturally fermented, and then we're going to help those healthy bacteria. Non-GMO products, I mentioned it earlier, please. There is a non-GMO label on some foods. Actually, it just says it's the GMO. There's a thing that's labeled. The labeling didn't pass, but there is something that you can see that it's non-GMO on certain foods. Eliminate your artificial sweeteners and drastically reduce the intake of carbohydrates and sugars. You can have carbohydrates in vegetables. I'm not saying to never have carbohydrates. But sugar creates an imbalance in the gut bacteria associated with inflammation and with bacteria. This was in Time magazine many years ago. Inflammation is the silent killer, and these are all the comorbidities that many of our people speaking have mentioned. So to summarize, the microbiome is vital to your health. Gut microbiome changes promote obesity, increase inflammation, and impair estrogen regulation. And we really think that the estrogen plays a huge role in lipedema patients. Improved nutrition, improved gut microbiota, normalize lymph production. Processed food, sugar, increase unhealthy gut bacteria. Probiotics, live good bacteria that live in your gut are very important. Prebiotics, fertilize the good bacteria that you already hopefully do have in your gut. And fiber-rich foods fight inflammation, quinoa, millet, amaranth, and buckwheat. And the gut bacteria produce butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid, when you give it good fiber. Digestion is good with medium-chain triglycerides. And then have fermented foods, avoid GMO, sugar, and carbs, and create, because those create the imbalance in the gut. And then, not least, I wanted to tell you to remember to breathe deeply, and we've had some wonderful classes with our beautiful, wonderful Edalie. Breathe deeply, and when you breathe, you're actually moving lymph. Laughter, which we did with Karen today, was really great. Laughter, actually, you're moving your lymphatics when you laugh, and you actually, when you're doing that, you're increasing serotonin, and you're helping your whole body and your microbiome. Get enough sleep and rest. Work on your emotions. It's hard. Some days are really, really hard, but work on your emotions because it helps a lot to be positive and have gratitude. There's always something to be grateful for in the world. I have my patients write a gratitude journal. So every night before they go to sleep, they write 3 things that they were grateful for that day. And it could be as simple as, I took a walk, the sun was shining, it was beautiful. And then when you don't feel so good, you go back to your gratitude journal. All of this actually helps your microbiome. Take an aromatherapy bath for relaxation if you can, bathe. If you can't, you can blend the oils in a lotion. And then I'm going to a quote from my favorite author, Michael Pollan. He wrote a book called The Omnivore's Dilemma. And he says right in the front of the book, eat food, not too much, mostly plants, and don't eat anything that your great-grandmother would not recognize. Yeah. So in one of his books, he also says, if it comes from a plant, eat it. If it comes from a plant, eat it. If it was manufactured in a plant, don't. Yeah. And he also talks about if it was served through the window of your car, don't eat it. Yeah, you should look at his books. He's fantastic. So I want to thank you very, very much, and I want to just inspire all of you.